This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today is edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We were glad you're here on today. I'm Cesar Delgado on today. The harvest season is underway in central Illinois, and the commodities markets is looking declining for right now with these prices for corn markets. How about the technical buying in the beans without China? We were talking about it with Connor Bridgman at agmarkets.net in Assumption, Illinois. And then the grains markets are challenging to be pretty difficult to find right price for corn and beans prices, but the prices are going through the technical aspects on soybean futures. How concerned about demand for soybean and corn? Well, we were talking about it with Christina vanahn from vanahn and Company. This been Back Roads of Illinois. The grains markets are challenging to be pretty difficult to find right price for corn and beans prices, but the prices are going through the technical aspects on soybean futures. How concerned about demand for soybean and corn? Well, we were talking about it with Christina vanahn from vanahn and Company. Hey, Christina, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Mm,
You know, I'm when you
I'm
look at
good.
when you look at how concerned I am for demand on soybeans and corn, you know, um, everyone likes to talk about corn demand and how great it is for exports, and it is. It's so hot. We have been just blowing corn demand out of the water. Obviously, we haven't known the last couple of weeks, and we won't know them until we get the government up and running again. But it has been extremely good. My concern is that we had a quarterly grain stock at the end of September that was bearish corn, and where they ended up changing the where the bearishness came from was they decreased feed use. And so now we're coming in here and we're going to show feed use for this year over 600 million bushel more than it was the prior year. And we have less cows, less pigs than we did a year ago. And we're supposed to be using 600 more billion bushel of corn. And I just have a hard time believing that that's going to happen. Now, can we pick up the rest of that on exports? I don't know because exports are already penciled in so high. So, I worry about that side of things that eventually we'll have yield come down in corn, but it'll be a wash with the export or it'll be washed with the feed use on the side of things. So that's concerning to me. And then obviously the elephant in the room is China for the demand on soybeans. We just know that it's a priority right now for President Trump, or at least he says it's a priority. He called out soybeans specifically here a couple of weeks ago. That was the first time he's really talked about that in this presidency, that he's going to talk to China specifically about soybeans. It's really been about fentanyl or rare earth minerals, TikTok leading up to this. It has not really been about agriculture. So it'd be nice to see if something could happen. My concern is the fact that they are talking heavily about issuing a check to the producer to offset this trade war, these tariffs. And if they're talking about that and being very serious about issuing that check, why would they be very serious about that if they think that they're going to be able to get China to buy some soybeans? So I'm very concerned about those two aspects on the demand side of things. I know people like to talk about how hot demand is for corn, but we have to acknowledge the fact that, they are currently penciling a very high feed use number for corn demand compared to a year ago.
How is the shorts for the corn, Christina?
Yeah, I think, when you look at it, you just need to kind of focus on the fact that we're not going to get that information right now for a while. When you look at kind of, what has managed money been doing? What are we seeing as far as fund flow? The last one we got, I think, Encompass trade through like September 23rd or 24th overall. So we're lacking some information overall about what the funds are looking at. We know that possibly sometimes when you see the fight on inflation, it could bring or the interest rates coming down. You could see possibly some people coming into commodities, but I don't know if you're going to be able to see that this go around. But without any sort of information, we just are lacking that big piece of getting an acknowledgement of what maybe funds are thinking about for this market movement.
Of course, we will see, but right now it's just pretty frustrated.
Yeah, it is like I've said this a couple different times. I'd rather watch paint dry right now than watch the corn market movement. It is stuck at 420. It does not want to move. Same thing for soybeans. Eventually, you're coiling this market so hard that you're going to see some sort of movement. But as of now, man, you just can't get anything to move. You can't get any news to move this market. And so we just are stuck here. And um, that makes for some really quiet trade.
You mentioned that we need more trade than not check. What about the technical side?
Yeah. We really do need more trade and less check. I mean, I think every farmer you talk to, the check is the last thing that they really want, right? It just causes more problems down the road. It continues to help farmers that aren't very good at their job continue to farm. It makes rent stay high because people have that cash in hand. And so, that is not what a producer wants is a check from the government. That's not why they farm. And so I think you'd rather see these trade agreements and these trade deals be happening. And so that's what you're really asking for them to do is search out these trade agreements. And maybe it can't happen with China, but trying to fill the void. We know that we're never going to be able to fill the demand that we find from China, but being able to fill some of it. Crush has done a good job making up some of it. And so just being able to work through those things, find some other countries to, add into the situation and know that, maybe we're looking at less soybean acres planted moving forward just because it doesn't pencil in our situation without China. So those are some conversations that I think we just need to have and continue to build into those crush facilities and have, more countries come and look at our demand structure and also look at, how can we build infrastructure to be an exporter of the meal product and, bean oil and working out those kind of trade agreements as well.
What is your prediction on next year acreage report?
Yeah, look, next year I think is interesting because if we cannot get a deal, naturally you should see a shift to more soybean acres just because we planted so many corn acres this year. But if you cannot get a trade agreement done with China and you don't see them buy our beans, I do think you're going to continue to see farmers say, hey, I am willing to put corn on corn on corn because I'm just not taking that risk on the table. It also comes down to the fact that, if you continue to give cash and a check to the farmer, you're going to be able to keep them cash solvent. Where if they did not have that check, I think a farmer would have, some farmers would have a banker saying, hey, you need to plant a crop that's a little less cost heavy and see those bean acres. But if you're going to have this check written to them, that's going to help them along the way that you're going to continue to support that to see more corn acres be planted.
What is your concern about supply and demand from beans, Christina?
Yeah, it all comes down to China. I mean, we need to have something happen between them. And if we're going to just keep kicking the can down the road, I mean, the tariff extension goes until the first week of November. And if we get to that point and they're not willing to budge and we're not willing to budge, they are close enough to Brazil's next crop that I'm just worried we're not going to see them around this year.
What about the October report from the Department of Agriculture?
Yeah, so they officially announced that that will not be happening, which is a huge bummer because it's such a great set of information. And we know that the last reports have been such big deals to the market. So now we move forward to look at the November one, and hopefully we can see that one happen. But really, the reports, any sort of payment to the farmer, all of those are on hold until you can get the government back up and running.
What is your thoughts with the livestock market with the cash cattle side, Joe?
Yeah, when you look at that, I mean, man, making new contract highs once again in feeder cattle. It just does not feel like that border to Mexico is going to open anytime soon. There was some talks that you were going to have conversations there were conversations between the US and Mexico and that you were going to continue those conversations, but it just does not look like that border is going to remain or that it could open up anytime soon between the US and Mexico. Therefore, continuing to support feeder cattle and making new contract highs. Once again, that market is so hot. Still about $2 to $5 off of the highs for live cattle. That one's just a little bit more sluggish. Obviously, the story is more feeder cattle when it comes to that, but yeah, it remains very, very hot.
Do you have any concerns about the consumer budget might have gonna be declining for the future?
Yeah, I think that's been a concern for quite some time, but it just hasn't seemed to stick or change anytime soon. So right now at this point, I mean, yes, you've started to hear some poor jobs reports and things like that, but we just not have not seen that change in consumer demand quite yet.
Do you have any final thoughts about the beans issues? Start with Christina.
Um, I just think that beans in general are on the brink of either breaking two, a buck to a buck and a half or rallying $2. And no one's going to know what that is. It's all dependent on, overall, when you look at it, just what we could possibly see and from China and what would happen there. So,
Thanks, Christina. I know that a floppy situation.
thanks so much, Caesar.
Christina vanahn from Vanahn and Company on back roads. The harvest season is underway in central Illinois, and the commodities markets is looking declining for right now with these prices for corn markets. How about the technical buying in the beans without China? We were talking about it with Connor Bridgman, the tech markets.net in Assumption, Illinois. Hey, Connor, how are you?
I'm doing good, Caesar. Glad to be back on. Glad to talk to you again. And yeah, we're in the dead middle of harvest here in Central Illinois, and so let's jump into it.
Good to see you, indicator for the Farm Progress Show. Meanwhile, let's start with our discussion on losing our biggest customer, which is China, of course. But I want to have you to take a moment to talk about the beans markets. What is your position with the beans markets without having China?
Yeah. So right now, bean harvest in my back door is all but done. Right, 80-90% we've got beans harvested. Um, so with the prices right now, we know that China has bought exactly zero U.S. soybeans for the upcoming crop year. We've got some friendly tweets or true socials, whatever you say, from our fearless leader that he is going to meet with China at the end of this month. I think that definitely adds some risk premium to it because the big question in the back of everyone's mind is what if China comes to the table, right? What if we see them start buying in a big way that they've been known to do around this time, right? Kind of before when Brazil's planting their crop, right? That's our window of opportunity before Brazil has a bunch of soybeans that they're ready to export, right? That's when we can really move a lot of soybeans to China historically. We haven't seen that. That window, I'll make the argument that it's still potentially open, right? It's shrinking, but that's definitely adding some risk premium to that. So let's talk the opposite way and say that a deal there is no trade deal done with China, or not one that talks specifically with soybeans. The question is, where do we go from here? The next, the other bullish cards you have is, is the yields out there, right? Is the USDA accurate on where they think yields are? I can speak from my back door and from what I'm hearing. We're definitely not making records in Central Illinois soybeans. I've heard some great yields, but I've also heard some lackluster ones. Right, when you're expecting 80, maybe we're in the 70s, 70, 75 or something like that, or on a little bit, maybe some worse ground or something that really didn't get some rain. We're in the 50s, 60s. But I just don't know if I'm not definitely hearing any type of disaster on the soybean market. So that being said, if we see China um, not come to the table, that demand's taken away. You got to think it's going to take a hit to the soybeans, especially even on just a speculative side. If we don't get that news, I got to see it's drifting lower. So all eyes. That's going to be the end of October, which is also kind of when we see November futures go off the board. So that's it's just going to be an important time frame. A lot of moving parts at the end of this month.
Do you have some fear that we are losing our customer to Brazil and Argentina, Connor?
Absolutely, and it's not that we're losing, right? You can make the argument that we've lost a big chunk of that business to China, and so it's if we went back 10 years ago, China was buying what I don't know the number off the top of my head, but 80 90% of their soybeans were coming from the United States. Now we're not. Brazil is by far and away the number one exporter in soybeans. So yeah, the question is 5-10 years down the road, is our hope to see the China business come back and to see China being the number one buyer of soybeans? I'll take it. Don't get me wrong, but I got to think the hope and maybe the wild card is going to be: can we see something with biofuels? Can we be crushing a big chunk of more of these soybeans in house to where we're not so reliant on this unreliable trade partner? Right. That's my hope. A couple years ago, it felt like we were a little bit closer to seeing some type of big swing in biofuels. Now, I'm not sure. Right, the hope can still be there, but we haven't seen any big, any type of policies or anything that says we're going that way in a big way. But I guess that'd be my hope is that if China comes to the table, gr- great, right? We will definitely be selling some beans to them, but it's not necessary to where we have demand in other avenues.
How about the technical buying in the beans markets really quick, but
Yeah, the technical buying in soybeans, right? We've got we saw a nice run up. What was that? 2 weeks ago, where if you put beans in the bin in my area, you had a shot at $11 for these deferred months, right? It was for May or even going out to June, which I know a lot of guys don't want to go out that far, but we are seeing some technical buying, right? We saw when we go back on a couple of these USDA reports, we saw more corn. They keep piling on the corn acres to where soybeans in terms of the demand side balance sheet doesn't look good, but it's getting a little bit more friendlier. Uh, Yields pulling back, acres pulling back to where uh, we've seen some technical buying now. Right now, in the past what 2-3 weeks, it's been a little, corn and soybeans both have been a little bit range bound. We're very much waiting to see something in terms of news, but I got to think, looking at the Nove 25 contract, we have not spent a whole lot of time below $10. Uh, Really going back to this summer, right? We made lows in August, but on the same lines, we have a hard time getting much above 1050. So it'd be nice, if we see something friendly and something concrete coming from Trump, from the United States meeting with China, and we get something there. That's when we'll see some really good technical buying.
sure. Connor, how is the yields in central Illinois with the drought we were dealing with?
I'd have to say generally a little bit better than what expectations were, and that's mostly because in a good part of areas in my back door, we didn't have any material rains in August, right? A lot of my customers, a lot of guys can say that the last good rain they had on this bean crop was at the end of July. Now that being said, the soybean yields uh, were still decent, right? Early yields were good. The fear was once we get into these later planted beans, is the drought going to affect them that much more? And I really feel like in my area, in my back door, 60 miles either way, it's going to come down. Did you get that rain in August to really help those bean yields along? And that's where a common theme is if guys said they had those great yields, right? Those high 80s, mid 90 bean yields. Well, we got that rain in August. That was the deciding factor. And so on soybeans, yields were decent, definitely not a failure, but um, I'd have to say on average, if I average it across, we're a little bit lower than last year. Corn, we've still got a whole lot of corn left to shell, but it's the same thing. I do not expect us to beat last year's yields in Central Illinois, right? I don't see the counties or the three counties around me breaking any records, but I think we're gonna have some good. Maybe we could say some APH or something like that in terms of corn yield. But time will tell, right? We've mostly seen the early planted corn. Let's see how this later planted stuff comes. But all in all, for how little rain we got in August, I think we're seeing some average to decent yields. Definitely no bin busters, but we're gonna be okay.
Do you heard any field fires in Decatur between Bloomington because there was one in Knox County on Saturday?
Knock on wood, no one that I directly talked to have had some field fires, but my gosh, I hear a lot of different areas having a combine catch fire, field catch fire, right? It's just so dry. We had the tiniest little shower. I mean, it barely got the sidewalk wet. I don't think it even put anyone out of the field for even a few minutes, but we got a little bit of a shower. But my gosh, we are dry. And now beans are generally speaking, we've got the bean cut, 80 90% done with bean harvest. We're going to have a whole lot of corn left to shell, and just very little rain in the forecast. The temperatures finally cooled down a little bit, but I saw we jump back into the 80s, so it's going to be hot and dry, it looks like, for at least the next couple weeks.
If you have crystal ball,
If I had a crystal ball, I would be a rich man, Caesar. I'd be so good at my job. I don't know if me and the kids would be in Central Illinois. I think we'd probably find a beach somewhere, and I'd just do all my trading from there if I had my crystal ball. I sure as heck wouldn't be dealing with these Midwest winters, I tell you that.
yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about the beans production in the Midwest?
No, final thoughts would be just in terms of production. I think given the lack of rain we saw in August, right, we didn't see that ideal finish to these soybeans, right? Yields reflected that. We didn't see across the board record soybean yields unless you caught that rain in August. Some areas did, a lot didn't. But talking to coworkers, talking to different clients in different areas, I feel like we've got a decent soybean crop, right? Time will tell. It's hard for me to gauge soybeans on a global scale. Can we see a record soybean yield? I think we could see it, right? Time will tell. And also, Again with the USDA closed, and it'd be interesting to see where yields start rolling in at. But soybean production, it's decent, but it's nowhere record, especially in Central Illinois.
Where people can find you for your consulting services for their grain marketing in Central Illinois, Connor.
Yeah, I'm in Assumption, Illinois. Work for agmarket.net. Feel free, you can go to our website and find me that way, or yeah, reach out anytime. Appreciate the plug, Caesar.
Thanks, Connor. I'm enjoying our conversation about the commodities markets.
Anytime. I always enjoy jumping on and giving a quick rundown about the state of things. So anytime, make sure to ask me to do it again.
Connor Bridgman from agmarkets.net on the Markets Club podcast.